Hi guys, I am Kat and welcome back to my channel. I hope you are having a lovely day, a beautiful night, and a wonderful January so far. It's crazy that it is almost over and we're about to hit Valentine's Day. Just feels like I blink and the time goes by. But lately, I've been watching a lot of zombie content. I've been watching a lot of The Walking Dead. I've been binge watching it because I stopped watching it in season 7, decided to pick it back up again, and now I'm in season 11 and it's about to end. But it just reminded me about how much I love zombie movies. It's my favorite genre in the horror movie realm, zombie apocalypse movies. And so it kind of got me looking up different zombie viruses and how interesting they are and how different some of them are, because you do have your regular run-of-the-mill shambling boring zombies, but then you have a lot of different types of viruses that I think are really cool. And so I just decided I wanted to make a video about that, which I know is kind of weird, but I'm sure there is someone out there who is also interested in zombies. And so I want to talk about 3 of my favorite zombie viruses that I think are really, really fascinating. So let's get into it. So we're gonna start off with number 3, I guess, if we're gonna start with a number system level, whatever. And we're gonna talk about the ZN1 virus from the TV show Black Summer. So this show is actually on Netflix, and it's the spin-off or sister series of Z Nation, which is also a zombie TV show on Netflix. I prefer Black Summer because it's a lot darker and scarier, while Z Nation, in my opinion, is more comic book and action. They're both really great shows, but I prefer the one that's scarier and puts me on the edge of my seat, and I think the zombies are actually scarier in this TV show, and I like that there's so much contrast. You get both, the best of both worlds. These zombies in particular are scary to me, one, because the infection rate is 100% and the fatal rate is 100%, because everybody is already infected. No matter what you do, you're already infected. And it's not the bite that turns you into a zombie. The bite just accelerates your death. It just infects you to where you die faster, but you're gonna turn anyway, whether you get shot, stabbed, hit by a car, scratched, and you happen to get septic, you're gonna turn anyway, which is really scary because it would make you afraid to do anything or be around anybody. But it's also really sad because you're fighting really hard so you don't get turned into a zombie, but at the end of the day, you're already infected. So regardless of what you do, you're probably gonna turn unless someone destroys your brain. But to me, what makes this virus in particular really fascinating is they turn and it is a dead body that is reanimated, but they still retain some of their problem solving skills and some of their intelligence, so they can still understand their environment, they can still work basic tools, they can still follow you and remember you and know where you went. There's a part in the 2nd season where after the girl gets hit by a car and her boyfriend leaves her and she turns, she finds a lady, and the lady runs into a house and she recognizes and remembers the house she went to and bangs on the door and tries to open the door. There's another part where a kid has to hide on top of a bus because this zombie in particular is waiting for him and is able to figure out doors and figure out where he's at. They retain a level of intelligence, which is scary because at least if it's a shambling, stupid zombie, eventually they forget about you and they go on their merry way. But when they're smart and fast and can run, I just can't help but feel like there's not a lot that you could do after that, because they're smart enough to know where you're at. They're smart enough to figure out how a door opens or to find you. That's really scary to me. It's scary because this creature, this monster, who is dead, who doesn't require breath or nutrition or sleep, and is still smart and can still use basic motor function and has coordination and can control minor tools, is chasing me, and I get tired and I get hungry and they don't. So really, when it comes to that kind of thing, how would I possibly survive? or anybody, to be honest. It would just be mostly the drive to not be ripped apart, basically. Number 2 of my favorite zombie viruses, and some of the most interesting in my opinion, is the World War Z virus from the book. So the World War Z movie and the World War Z book are absolutely different. They are nowhere near the same. They are so different. I mean, the only things that are similar is they're zombies, and that's about it. And I actually really like the book because the book actually takes place after the infection, and the author or narrator is interviewing people about their experience during the infection. Now, this infection is called, and I'm going to say this wrong, the Solanum virus, and a lot of people speculate as to where the virus came from. People believe that it came from the Three Gorges Dam, I believe, of when they were trying to build it, and that someone got infected from the water there. But there's also theories that it could be biowarfare, or it could even be potentially alien. But this virus destroyed more than half of the Earth's population and economics, and they're trying to build that up, but it absolutely destroyed the human population entirely. But it is 100% fatal and 100% communicable, and there is absolutely no cure unless you were to amputate the part of your body that got bitten. But if you got bitten on the neck or the forehead or your rib cage, you can't cut that off. I mean, you could cut off my head and I wouldn't be infected, I'd just be dead. But it's 100%. It's also fluid based. So meaning, if you got someone's blood on you, if you got scratched, spit, if you're having spicy physical activities with your partner and you don't know they're infected, you would get infected. Another thing that you could get infected by is, say someone got scratched, right? They have a small tiny scratch, and then they go to donate a kidney. They're infected, and that kidney is infected, so they're going to infect the person that receives the kidney. It would make you feel like you couldn't be around anybody because you could infect anybody on accident. You could literally infect 5 people on accident, and that is scary. But there are 2 things about this virus that are scary. One is the reanimation process would be scary because it is a 23-hour reanimation process. And I wrote it down because I didn't want to miss it, because this sounds like the worst, most excruciating and terrifying process of reanimating into a zombie. I wrote it down. Hold on. So the first hour, you get immediate pain and discoloration where you got bitten and the blood starts to clot. Within 5 hours, you get really aggressive joint pain and strong fevers, so terribly strong, chills, and you start to get slight dementia. So you start to lose parts of your mind. In 8 hours, you now have severe dementia. Your fever becomes so intense that it's basically melting your brain and you lose muscle control. In 11 hours, your lower body paralyzes and you go completely numb, entirely numb. In 16 hours, you fall into a coma. In 20 hours, you go into cardiac arrest and you die, and reanimation is in 23 hours. The only benefit of it is the dementia part, because part of you would start to forget why it's happening, but you're still experiencing the pain and the chills and the agony and the fever. And if you have dementia, you're going to keep forgetting why that's happening. So you're living through it several times until you finally go into cardiac arrest, which I've heard is already painful, and then you die. If I got bitten and they couldn't amputate, I would just have someone kill me, because I feel like that would be the better alternative to having to go through that awful, awful experience. But to me, what makes this virus the most interesting is the way that it reanimates. The way that it does, because it is so different than regular zombies. So basically, when you get bitten or scratched or kissed, and the virus gets into your body, what it does is it starts to attack the cells on your frontal lobe and completely destroys them. And it makes it so it can replicate. It replicates and starts to basically dismantle your brain or make your brain go dormant, and then begins to mutate your brain so that it can create its own new organ that it can control, so it can control your body. It doesn't need your brain anymore, so it mutates its own out of your brain, right? But it makes you basically a super soldier. So it's reanimating you, destroying the cells in your frontal lobe, replicating so it can mutate your brain into a new organ of its own, making you a super soldier because it makes them so durable. They can deal with the pressure of the ocean. They can get shot a lot, lit on fire. They are incredibly difficult to kill. So this virus is smart enough to create its own organ out of an organ and makes you into a goddamn super soldier. And you can, and you are like a flesh-eating machine. And that is so interesting. And that's why I think the theory that it's from space makes sense to me. Because as far as I know, I've never heard of a virus that can mutate a brain into its own organ. Granted, this is a book. It is a book. It's not real. But there is something terrifying about a virus that is smart enough and intelligent enough to replicate and mutate the brain into its own organ so it can control the body. And the body doesn't need any energy or oxygen or food. It just becomes a flesh-eating, virus-spreading, killing machine. And that is so... it's very cool. It is very cool, but it is also very terrifying. Because what if the virus, like, mutates more? Because over time, viruses do mutate. Like, in The Walking Dead, we're starting to see variants of walkers. In Resident Evil, the T-virus and the G-virus and the mutation with that. COVID-19 had several variants because the virus adapts and grows so it can fight against whatever's being thrown at it. So if this virus already is mutating a brain into its own brain, what if there's another variant of this virus? What is it gonna do? Like, it's wild and so different from the movie, because in the movie the virus is intelligent because it only attacks those that are healthy and viable enough to be able to spread it. So it won't attack people who have cancer or something else that makes the body not strong enough to spread it, which is also very interesting in itself, but it's so different. So if you like World War Z, it's one of my favorite zombie movies, but if you like World War Z, I suggest you read the book, because the book is so good. It is so good. And it's so different than the movie by a long shot. I saw the movie before I read the book, and I thought I was going to read the book and it was going to be about Brad Pitt's character, but then I was like, no, this is vastly different, and it's actually better, which is not surprising. Books are usually better than their movies, but the Solanum virus is fascinating as hell and scary as hell, because a virus that is smart enough to do what it does is terrifying, and I can see how most of the population was absolutely destroyed, because that little teeny virus is smarter than all of us. And then sitting at number 1, it was gonna be number 2, this virus I'm gonna talk about, but after reading about it more, I realized how cool it actually is, because I was going to do the Solanum virus as one, because I find that one of the most interesting viruses that I've read about. But then I remembered that this virus is really interesting, and then I read about it more, and I was like, this has to be number 1, and it is the Rage virus from 28 Days Later. Now, the reason I think it is so cool is because the Solanum virus and the ZN1 virus is a reanimating virus. So basically it reanimates the dead. The rage virus, in 28 days later, doesn't. The rage virus infects regular people and induces incredible rage and aggression, but the people are still alive. They are still living. They're not the reanimated dead, and they don't require to rip flesh apart. All they want to do is infect, but they are so incredibly aggressive. So something I always noticed was that when you watch other zombie movies, they rip people apart and eat their flesh, but the rage virus, they don't do that. They're not eating the flesh. They're just aggressive as fuck, angry as fuck, and just want to infect, and they're going to do that in any way they can. But they're also kind of smart. Their intelligence is not as high as like the ones in Black Summer, but they're still really high. They can still operate small machinery. They can still like have coordination, but they also recognize their surroundings, and they can deduce the smartest way to get to their target, whether it be breaking through a window, climbing up a wall. They can still figure that out, and that is also terrifying. But what's also really interesting is that these zombies will die, not just because you shoot them in the head, because they are difficult to kill, but because they experience starvation, because they're still living creatures and they do still require nutrition, but because they're so full of rage, they're not thinking about eating, so eventually they die because of malnutrition. And that is so crazy and so cool to me, because it didn't occur. I didn't realize that they're still alive, because whenever I hear of zombies or something like a zombie virus, I just assume they're dead, but they're not. And there's also a theory that if you notice, they don't like to be in direct sunlight. Like when Jim finds them in the church, they're in the dark. When they get attacked in the tunnel, they don't chase them into the sunlight. And in 28 weeks later, they also prefer to stay underground. So there's something about sunlight that they don't like. They also can't swim at all. So I guess if you were to live on an island, that would keep you safe. Because one of the interesting things about that is the virus isn't very spreadable because it's within living creatures. So it doesn't really spread very much, and they can't swim. But I guess if someone who was infected got on a plane, it could potentially spread, but it's so interesting, and it's fluid based. So spit, a scratch, blood, any type of fluid. So once again, not only is it scary because they're smart, they're alive, and they run, but because of the adrenaline, because they're pumped full of anger and adrenaline that they can run and climb, it would make you feel very isolated. You wouldn't trust anybody around you, and you'd be afraid to get close to people because you'd be scared that somehow you would get infected or you infect them. But also what's interesting about it is the speed of the, not reanimation, but the speed of the infection depends on how much rage you've been exposed to. So like Frank, he gets a drop of blood in his eye. So it takes a moment for him to become infected. But one of the soldiers that gets like blood vomit to the mouth, he reanimates or gets infected automatically, instantly, because he's been exposed to so much rage. I'm sure it would also depend on the health of your body, because if you're sick and then you get exposed to rage blood, you'd probably turn really quickly. But I've always found that so fascinating. And 28 Days Later is one of the most brilliant zombie movies to ever exist. And I've said this before, but I still believe that the rage virus is just souped up rabies. But it's such a good movie because it doesn't just talk about the scary, terrifying zombie apocalypse and how scary that would be and how isolating it would be and how you'd have to check over your shoulder because you don't want to be aggressively attacked by zombies. But it also shows the scarier side, which in my opinion is the people that have to survive the apocalypse, because fear and the need to survive can make you do some really fucked up, twisted shit. And I like that the movie shows both halves of that coin, because usually it's either you get the scary part of the zombies or you get the scary part of the humans. But I like this movie, and what makes it brilliant is you get both sides. And that's really, really cool. But I forgot how interesting this virus is. It's always been one of my favorite viruses, but completely forgot how fascinating it was, because, and how different it is, because you always hear of just, it's the living dead. But this time, it's the living. They're just really angry and want to tear you apart. Alrighty, so that is 3 of my favorite zombie viruses that I have read about and seen in movies, TV shows, and books. There's also so many in video games that I think are really, really cool that I could talk about as well, but I love zombie movies. They are genuinely my favorite genre and my genre of choice. If I had a zombie movie, and like, I also like romantic comedies. It's such a weird two sides of the spectrum, but I always choose a zombie movie if I have a choice in horror movies, because they're my favorite. And so I love zombie content. I find it very fascinating. And I think part of the reason why I find it fascinating is scary is because I don't see how that it's not possible. Because biological warfare and bioengineering to me is so fascinating, but so terrifying. Because you have people that are smart enough to create anything or have access to viruses that are locked away, and who's to say that someone doesn't take one of those viruses, soup it up, and create zombies? I mean, COVID somehow got out, so like, and COVID knocked us on our ass for a few years. So who's to say that a zombie virus or even a rage virus isn't possible? And I think that's why I find it fascinating and scary and interesting. It's one of the few things in the horror genre that actually scares me, because there is a potential that it could happen. So yeah, and I find it so fascinating. And the people who create these worlds and can take something that has been done so many times and make it into something different, I think is really, really cool. And I'm excited for The Ones Who Live, the other Walking Dead spinoff, because I'm excited to see what happens with Rick and Michonne. And I hope there's more zombie content that comes out, and to see what happens. And yeah, so if you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you like zombie movies, or if you have a favorite zombie virus, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. And I hope that your January is going really, really well, and that your mental health is treating you okay. And thank you so much for joining me in this video. If you want to hit the subscribe button, feel free to do so, and hit the bell notification so you can be notified whenever I post. And I hope you have a wonderful day and a beautiful night. And this is Kat, signing off. Bye.